Hello, welcome to another episode of Refute This, the 1v1 debate show that I've started. My name is Sideshow. With me, as always, is Yiska of what should I say? You're of actually. Every time I get to the word of, I think Winston's Lab. But you also do your own video content. What are you of, Yiska?
Of myself, really. I don't know.
Of Germany?
I'm not even really involved with Winston's Lab, other than talking to Baroy here and there. I'm not at all involved in these business decisions. I just write shit, maybe
Sure.
once a month or something, and then yeah.
So I'm here with Yiska of Writing Shit, representing only himself and no larger companies or bodies, with his delicious mug of morning coffee. Okay, and the topic here, after we've rambled enough, is Contenders Korea will overtake Owl. That's the title. I am in pro. What do you say? What does pro stand for? In proposition? Proposition? I actually don't know. I'm an idiot. I
I
don't know
don't
what this
think
means.
that's it.
It definitely isn't that. But anyway, I am for this statement. Yiska is going to be arguing against this statement. So I'm going to set out my my argument here. So the idea of overtaking, let's just put this out there, that either the best team in the world will come from Contenders Korea, or that the overall level of the top teams, like the elite teams, will overtake the top teams in Overwatch League. So I'm pretty much focusing on the top teams here because as with any system that contains promotion and relegation and stuff like this, the bottom teams, the guys that sift to the bottom of the contenders table, the 16 teams in there, they're not all going to be better than the Overwatch League. I'm not mental. They're not all going to be utterly world class. This has never existed for
Of course.
Apex in the past and Contenders Korea. So my argument would be that the top level teams, and I think it could even be multiple teams, but I think it's very likely that the top level team at some point will end up being better than the Overwatch League, and I think as we go further and further, we'll see this repeat over and over again. May not happen every time, but I think it will be a trend that we notice. Now, the reasons for this are that very good teams, I mean, for season one, very good teams already exist in Korea. It's very possible that a team like Runaway, like the new X6, like Ardiont or Element Mystic could end up being the best team in the world, and we wouldn't be able to see that until we saw the off-season games at the end. They don't seem to be there at the moment, but the other thing about Korea is that the teams improve incredibly quickly. If you look back at other teams and how they climbed up the ranks, there are not just good teams constantly coming up, but good players as well. The overall level and tendency of teams to accelerate in terms of their skill seems to happen quite quickly over in Korea. You get teams improving very quickly. And in that vein, there are also examples. So you can reference other esports about stuff like League of Legends, where you get constant rising of Korean talent over there. But we've even seen it in the short tenure of Overwatch. I mean, if Overwatch League was happening a year ago, if it had begun a year ago, and you'd locked these 12 teams in, what people thought were the 12 best teams at the time, and left everybody else to their own business, you wouldn't have teams like GC Busan, who rose up and were the best team in the world and won Apex and looked so fantastic and actually got signed by London Spitfire and came into it. You wouldn't also have New York Excelsior, basically, because the team that became Luxury Watch Blue when they added Flower at the end of IEM Kyangi and ended up winning that was at the end
You
of
mean like the
2016.
fifth or sixth best team in
Okay, all
Overwatch
right,
League,
but they won.
like proven last time?
They won IEM Kyangi, and they are a potential. You can't deny that they're potentially one of the best teams in the Overwatch League as well. They certainly could end up winning it, and I think most people would have them in the top 3 or top 4, and I think it's a reasonable possibility that they might have won it. And they also wouldn't be involved because they had kind of a meteoric rise. So I think very good teams already exist. Other very good teams are likely to emerge over the course of a year, which is when teams are locked into Overwatch League. And Korea just produces this talent over and over again. So the general tendency will be that the best teams in Korea end up being the best teams in the world and supplant the what would be the old guard that are locked into the Overwatch League. What say you to that?
I didn't get that actually. Can you repeat?
Oh, okay,
Broke up.
yeah. So I think that because teams in Korea are so good already, and they will continue to improve and consistently churn out new talent, that the overall tendency will be that the Korean teams are the best teams in the world, and they will replace and supplant the old guard that are locked into the Overwatch League. And so, because there's no promotion and relegation system within the Overwatch League, if a team is ever to rise up and beat the teams of before, that will mean that Contenders Korea is better than the Overwatch League in terms of its elite teams.
Sure. Do you know of the fact that what happens when you take an apex predator out of an economic system? You know what happens? Weak ass shit predators fill that fucking vacuum. They're weak as shit until someone evolves, eventually at some point. And you know what happens then? When someone finds out that this new predator arises, he gets snatched up real quick in order to keep that ecosystem going. Because that's one major thing that we have to think
Are we
about.
talking about
It's not,
franchising in the jungle? Who's picking up apex predators in the jungle? What, signing them to contracts? Like a T-Rex evolved in the jungle, and you're like, holy shit, this is such a good predator. Let me sign him. Like some kind of Jurassic
that's
Park
the best
zoo.
thing. It's exactly what's happening because it's no longer Apex. Let's keep this in mind. So it's not the possibly, that was the system these Korean teams spawned from, right? Now you are locked into a contender season, and the funny thing is, and that is true for all contender seasons, they will be signed. They will be up for grabs mid-season. So how can you ever, develop as a team or as a, even as an individual among your team if your shit constantly keeps being picked up, right? Because so if we think about this, so at the end of stage 2, the gates open, right? That is, and then it goes for the entire stage 2.
Yeah,
and
the end of stage 1, the gates open for the whole of stage 2. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And do you happen to know when stage 2 closes then? Or
I mean, I could get it up for you. I don't know exactly. I think it's a period of a few weeks.
but I'm
maybe a
pretty
month,
sure
like that.
that is in the middle of contenders. So there's no assured competitive integrity. They could be snatched up every time you see, for instance, you just did a video on these young Korean boys, right?
Yeah. The hot young Korean boys, hot in terms of form, playing very well.
But like
Only
someone like an
theoretically
architect
in your area. Okay.
So someone like an architect could immediately be snatched up. And what happens then to that team? Suddenly there's a vacuum in that team that no other Genji could realistically fill. You need to, to develop that synergy. And suddenly everything crumbles together. Just imagine what would happen to Runaway if Huxal was sucked out of that system immediately.
Dude, Haxa will never be sucked out of Runaway. You know why? Because the Koreans have some kind of unbinding, crazy loyalty. Either that or Runner and Flowervin are actually keeping them in chains, and they're just slave children inside of this house. And in which case, it's the best kind of PR move ever made, ever. Because can you imagine this situation where they have locked them into like really draconian contracts, and they're like, you have to talk nicely about us the whole time, and yet the whole thing's also happy, and there's so much loyalty. I love. It's actually now headcanon for me that Runner and Flowervin are the evil overlords of Runaway. I would love that to be true. But this wouldn't happen in Runaway because they're just loyal to each other. They would stay together. They already have been trying to be poached tons of times.
Yeah. These romance stories, dude. Like, get the fuck out of Greece or whatever you're watching right now. Like, obviously, like if someone rolls around with a check, these motherfuckers are obviously going to jump on that train immediately. Maybe not Runaway, and I'm not sure what Breanna is doing to these kids in order to rob their careers and their primes. But like, if an architect isn't jumping ship, if I don't know, like a Seoul Dynasty or whatever, and Seoul might actually be the team that needs them the least. But basically, every single other team could use someone like architect. He would probably immediately be the best Genji in the league if we're thinking about it. Maybe contesting with someone like Fleda or. I mean, down the line, maybe like someone like a Flower. And also, by the way, Flower, expert example why that talent's immediately sucked up, already signed to the organization. He's not going to supplement any roster in Contenders Korea. So again, this will be that this league will feed more than Breanna Genji, dude. Like this. There's no way. And no, you don't get to score this shit towards Contenders Korea being good, because at no point, at no plank time, is a team going to be better than Seoul Dynasty. There will be a vacuum, and let's not forget about this. And that was actually the core of the first argument. When the top dogs leave an ecosystem, and we saw that with the West too, when Rogue and Envious left, immediately, okay, then you have other top teams like Selfless or like an Immortals that filled the hole in NA, but these teams don't improve at the same rate. You're taking out the top goal to beat, by which you develop strategies. For instance, someone like GC Busan, the reason they had that astronomic rise was simply because they were playing a counter style to these huge teams like a Lunatic High or whatever, and they could therefore develop that talent. Now, if you're playing against shitty ass strategies, it doesn't matter if you can beat those. You need to beat the top dogs. So, I don't think that there's any way that this talent keeps astronomically rising, and you definitely need rivals. Rivals push you to that level, and if your rival is worse than the rivals they have in Overwatch League, then very likely you are also going to be worse. So I don't see how that's going to happen. Do you want to just concede that point and linger there in your chair?
No,
or
absolutely not. No,
I got more.
I was just waiting for you to. Okay,
from.
right. Well, here you go then. The fact of the matter is, yes, there's 47 Korean players that have moved over and are now playing in the Overwatch League, right? And have you heard about scrim results over here? Yeah. And scrims is the way that you're talking, because you're talking about scrim results, right? In terms of developing, like they're not really developing that much in terms of actually like playing matches against
just also
Seoul Dynasty, because they only played like 2 matches against them and they slammed them. So it must be in scrims where they're getting to practice against these really top opponents, right? It's like
I mean,
it's through
the games itself are also like the practice that they are basically, the carrot on the stick that keeps you going, right? Like why would you practice for golden pineapple? It doesn't.
A golden pineapple in this sense is actually a ridiculously large prize pool, and the fact that you would be the best team in Korea. But I think I would take that over golden pineapple. I think
large prize pool, mate. Like, pretty sure that Jaehong earns more a year than the entirety of Contenders Korea together.
All right, but if you're saying that they have, in some sense, lost motivation to play because the best people are gone, I don't believe that for a second. I mean, the Koreans are just born motivators. But my point is that if your argument is built on the fact that 47 of these players have left, a lot of the top teams have left, that's absolutely undeniable, by the way. I'll definitely give you that one. But they have not reduced the scrim atmosphere in Korea. I definitely don't believe that.
No.
Every time you talk about people going over to, every time you talk to people who've gone over to Korea, they talk about how much parity there is in terms of there are so many scrim partners that you can play against that give you very good, very competitive games. You can dip into the talent from the top of China and they will play on Korean servers. You can dip into teams like Ardion who are playing over in the Pacific, and hell, I mean, you can dip way down if you want to and play against bloody, what do you call them, blank and the other Pacific teams. But
exactly,
that's
the point. Like,
okay, but the amount of
then that's not really competitive, mate.
Okay, but the amount of actually competitive scrim teams to play against is higher still now in Korea than it probably is in the Overwatch League. In terms of the people that you're playing against here, Seoul Dynasty and these guys are having as competitive scrims in the Overwatch League in the West Coast of America as they are in Korea.
Quality-wise, no.
Yes,
no way.
in terms of quality, I absolutely think that's the case. They are playing against the same level of Western teams that were moving over to Korea and saying how phenomenal the scrim atmosphere was over there. The fact that you had so many teams that you could play against. Now, yet they're all in the same location here. I mean, they could potentially play against each other over in Los Angeles, but the fundamental level of scrims that you're able to get, I don't think has decreased by removing 3 top teams from from Korea. The important thing about Korea was always the depth of talent that they had. The
I
fact
mean,
that they always
yes,
had people hungry to improve.
it's not just about the teams though. It's also about the individual talent that has been sucked out of Korea for even someone losing someone like an Effect, and Envy is not partaking anymore. Already did huge things to the star power, or to like if you don't encounter a tracer like Effect in your games, you don't know what's happening. Someone's running at you at 100 miles an hour, and you have a fucking stick to fend him off. It doesn't like you
The thing
need
is,
a bigger
though,
stick.
if you're talking about Effect, there are also huge amounts of other very good tracers that were playing in Korea at that time and are still playing in Korea now. And I mean, the fact that I did a video just now on the 10 underage, I don't know why I use that word, 10 under 18 players who are all coming up. Every year, there are huge, fresh batches of these Korean young players that you don't see in other areas that constantly rejuvenate them in terms of star players. There are so many good players that come up all the time. I mean, again, to use the example, if we think the thought experiment of had Overwatch League started a year ago, Effect was one of these guys that was rising up, and you would have had to like possibly steal him in the season afterwards or do something of this nature, because he would not have been involved in Overwatch League had it run the first time around a year ago. It would be different. Different teams are locked in that at the time were fantastic, but a year later there are a whole brand new fresh batch of teams to overtake them, because the overall tendency of Overwatch, it's really young, is to improve, is that the teams keep getting better, they keep developing, new talent is constantly rising to the top. Hell, half the players in Overwatch League weren't in top teams even a couple of months ago, 6 months ago, certainly not a year ago.
But what you need is a team that goes from shit tier to best team in the world in a matter of a month. Otherwise, they get again sucked or
Okay,
separated, because
I
you have to basically have someone fucking go submarine mode for the time that the transfer window is open. Hope that nobody from that team gets sucked up and then astronomically rise.
but
Is the coach going to tell them, please suck for a month, so you don't get hired for absurd amounts of money, so you
okay,
can
but
keep
here's
playing for me? So
the way
for
that
a
they
week, we are the best team in the world
the
for
way the
fucking nothing.
fucking hell, the way the mid-season transfer window works, I just looked it up, is that it actually ends at the same time as Contenders begins. So they wouldn't have even seen these guys play in Contenders beforehand. So I mean, it's still quite reasonable to say they could have dug into like old VODs or something like this, but the guys literally aren't playing. You can't dig into stuff like scrims if you're not scrimming against these teams. You can't identify upcoming talent if they literally have not been playing. And thanks to the dearth of tournaments outside of
Just
Contenders Korea, you
as a
can't.
side point, right? If you ever need more young underage Korean boys, like just ask Roy. He has like a catalog of unknown talent where they don't even have Western names yet. They're just letterings that we cannot read. They are just apparently stellar. Roy keeps raving on about some mad Winston talent
Oh
that
yeah, yeah, I've heard him
just
talk about
lost
that.
in solo queue.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy actually that he has all this list of players. It's almost as if like young players are constantly coming up in Korea, right? And replenishing the old players. And like Baroy, who
Sure, dude.
knows a lot about it, is able to identify these and make big lists. This list, how long was it, Yisko? How long did you say it was? You were like looking down at the floor as if it was rolling out
Fucked
to
up there,
forever.
didn't I?
That's Korea. That is why they're gonna
But
overtake the
still,
Overwatch
like
League teams, because they're
these
constantly
scouting
generating
methods
talent.
are getting better, mate. Like they're also the new Overwatch League teams will also need rosters in the future, and that will also probably happen. It's not just that the Overwatch League teams that are currently in Overwatch will suck up this talent, but people that are not bound to these transfer windows because they can pre-assign, I don't know, like contracts that sign them to their organization for 2019. So if we're thinking that what's reasonable, let's think at least 4 organizations I would think are reasonable to expect in as a sign-on for Overwatch League. Like that's potentially like 48 players that you need to replenish. That's the exact amount that we already have. Can you suck up another Lunatic High, another KDP, another GC Busan, and not leave Korea? Dude, like that's when you're sucking, when you come in, she keeps on sucking. So at some point, that shit is dry. You can't anymore. It's over. But
So again, right? We can in terms of picking up players in the mid-season and stuff like this. You can't steal whole teams. So to use this thought experiment again, if we go back in time and we start the Overwatch League at the beginning of 2017 instead of the beginning of 2018, what happens? GC Busan look like they're doing really well. They win challenges. They're looking like a solid team at this point. They don't look like world beaters though. This is not the case where you would want to sign the entire team and take a big risk on them or something like this. But I mean that's out of the question anyway because they weren't in a position like the Overwatch teams league teams are not in a position to drop rosters. They can't just make wholesale changes and pick up brand new teams that are looking fantastic.
yeah,
They would need 6 slots on their roster. Now, London Spitfire doesn't have room for even a single
sure.
person on their roster. They would have to get rid of some in terms of they would have to trade them to other Overwatch League teams and then pick up fresh talent. Uh, who
That's
else is there?
hard, right? With the talent that Soul has, nobody would want a Guido or nobody would want a Munchkin, right?
Well,
It's very hard to get rid of.
here's the thing.
It's like a bond sale.
The other teams that they are trading them to are Western teams. That it's not just like the easiest pickup in the world to pick up somebody. Okay, maybe you can pick up. I mean, I don't think they would go for Guido. I think if you were trying to trade Guido to a Western team, you would have actually quite a lot of difficulty trying to trade that away. But somebody like Fleta, for example, or somebody, it's easiest just to play kind of a soul hero. I think this is why most of the solo Korean players are tracers is because it's easier to just have a fantastic star tracer that you guide the rest of your team around and you tell them like they have the game sense on tracer to be able to fit in anyway. Guys like Asher, Carpe Effect. Um, but you can't trade players like I don't know Nuss or Fury or Hagopion or Closer or these guys can't be traded over to the Western teams. They just wouldn't
Sure.
fit into their systems. So the spots that they have to be able to pick up people, they could only glean at most like your star player of the one team. Now, for some teams that would be a big blow. For a lot of teams, for a team like Runaway as well, I don't think that would be a big blow. I mean, even if they lose Haxel in that situation, motherfucker's been playing Lucio for a lot of the games in Apex. Like they have Cox sat there as
Sure.
well. You would have to pick up 3 players from Runaway, I think, to gut that team. And
Yes.
at that point, there aren't going to be people looking in the midseason for 3 separate players from all of these teams to the point where you're actually going to gut the Korean scene in the midseason. Even if they were able to do the scouting for it, and even if they wanted to, and even if they could clear players off their
Dude, there's so
roster
many
to be able to.
teams that we expect to not do well in Overwatch League. Like Florida Mayhem has only 6 players. They can sign on another team basically. They could sign basically who's looking the best in Korea in scrims. Just sign them on. Just get him.
But they wouldn't. It's such a mad thing to do because they would have to sit there with their current team. I mean, it was fine in theory, but they
KDP
wouldn't
and
do it.
GC
It'd be
Busan
a
also a
terrible
mad thing
PR
to do?
move. Well, that's kind of a crazy thing to do, but they blended the rosters together and they're intended to do some strange combination of the teams or something like this. But to actually have a Western roster and then sign a whole new Korean roster and just
I mean, it sounds
literally
like a joke.
replace like Tweak and Logics and those guys and just literally sit them all on
No.
the bench for the rest of the thing. I mean, that is madness. That would be a terrible PR move, especially for a team that for the whole of the beginning of the season has been trying to boost the fans of that team and try and sell those players and do a lot of interviews with them and stuff like that. It would be madness to straight replace them like this.
But by the way, just as a quick point, right? Why do you think Korea has that much talent to develop, or where does it come from? Why is that?
I don't know the answer to why it does. But I also think that I don't really have to provide the answer to why. I just have to provide the evidence that it does.
No. Yes,
but,
yes.
So,
and I'm
so
telling you,
yeah, go on.
The reason why that happens so quickly and why it will decelerate at an breathtaking pace is simply because, okay, if we remember back, like in the beginning of the year, Overwatch was slowly creeping up to League of Legends in PC Bank shares, going at like, I think they went out at 25% each, and then Overwatch got like a percent higher or whatever. Now PUBG is here, dude. None of that top Korean talent cares about Overwatch anymore. You know what Overwatch is currently at in the PC bank? 11%, mate. More than half the people that played. There's no way that the same amount of talent is going to play Overwatch anymore. That that your young boys are currently somewhere in fucking Pochinki, looting skulls and bragging. That is a big thing. Like, yes, Korea, as long as they are culturally engaged in the game, they will dominate that game. That's dwindling in Korea. We're not seeing that type of fandom anymore, and apparently not even Seoul Dynasty can keep that thing alive. And maybe actually sucking up out that talent actually killed the scene or the fandom in that regard. Now young Koreans also have no one to look up to in their, or they couldn't counter in solo queue or whatever. But then obviously all the other issues they encounter in their solo queue, one of which, having a booster in Overwatch League. It's just, if that keeps going down and down, where is that talent going to come from? It's not like StarCraft 2 currently produces like the maddest Korean talent. That's a very tiny fraction. I think it might be overtaken by the Brood War again. So, and what do we see? Like, a lot of foreigners are currently able to compete with them in some way, much more than it was the case when StarCraft was in its prime in Korea. So we can't say that the same rate of talent development will continue, and the best metrics we have for that is that it's at least going to be halved. And then, as well as sucking out that talent, I don't think there's any coherence in play that we are going to see that can elevate them above Seoul Dynasty or someone that, again, is in a better practice environment now too. Also, let's not forget they're practicing on a LAN client, which is very different. You can't even say, like, it's almost playing like a different game for them if they're playing online Korea and these scrims. Like, Widowmaker's not as strong, Tracer's not as strong. So how are you going to develop that talent? It's only going to get worse. All the structure around the talent creation has just gotten worse.
Well, for starters, you actually don't know that they're not going to be playing on LAN in Contenders Korea. They could very easily be playing on LAN. I mean, it's going to be run by
in a practice
MSBC or whatever. Yeah, I mean,
NBC.
Do you know NBC? Do you know what the practice was like at Apex? I mean, presumably they were practicing.
Wasn't LAN?
Was it LAN? Was it not LAN?
No, it was not LAN.
Well,
it was like very low ping because Seoul has very good internet, but it's not the same.
Well, then your argument,
even if it's true ping, is.
Well, then your argument again falls down because those teams were able to develop the abilities when they were playing online and then went into
yes, because everyone else was on that same. It's not inherently about practicing online for offline play. Now we practice offline for offline play, so obviously that's an advantage.
These are so small, like tiny little pieces, though. The end result.
That's a different game, mate.
It literally isn't, though. It's literally just Overwatch. It's like playing a marginally different meta. It's so overblown. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you've never played on the LAN client as well. Neither of us have played on the LAN client. We're going off secondhand references of pro players who think they can tell the difference between 140 hertz and 240 hertz monitors by fucking blink of their eye. Listen, Yiska, the human eye can't see more than 25 frames per second. It's a scientific fact.
No. I remember in 2010, fucking Rafa was sitting there and he was going like, oh yeah, it's currently 310 frames, 340, 360. And I'm looking at that frame rate and he can tell it every time. Of course they can, dude.
What was that? Quake Live, the game that was locked to 125 FPS?
Quake, I don't know what. It was 2010, basically, when you still had hair, basically.
All right. So here's what was the point before you were waffling on about the LAN client? Because the LAN client's such a non-issue, but you had a...
Okay, please see LAN play went down. Explain that, mate.
Oh, PC bar play, exactly. Yes. So the idea that there is, in some sense, not a cultural engagement with Overwatch, despite it going down to 11%. I mean, it's still the third most played game in PC bongs, and yes, it's gone down from where it was at, which was a nuts level, but it still has huge amounts of engagement. I mean, have you seen the what do you call them, fan engagements with people. Like when Seoul Dynasty were engaging in their fan giveaways, and when Kongdu Panthera run their stuff over in Korea, and the amount of people that turn up to the massive events that they've got going on, it's crazy fan engagement. There are people rabid for this game still, and also the path that you can get to becoming a pro gamer is so much easier than going through something like PUBG, which at the moment doesn't have any infrastructure at all involved in it. You would have to compete in tournaments and get good and get noticed and literally just perform at a high level. Again, we also PUBG is unproven in terms of being able to get return on esports
Cool. And still
organizations
someone
and
like
stuff.
Gamzu went like, oh yeah, I could be in Overwatch League on uh, not Evermore. But I could be in Overwatch League on Boston at least, but I'm rather playing and winning tournaments here.
Yeah, but
Like,
the difference
oh,
there is that Evermore was incredible at PUBG, like tried it and was incredible. You're arguing that people are going to start at the beginning and a considerable portion of them are going to spend all of their time trying to get good at PUBG rather than spending all of their time trying to get good at Overwatch. There are still a huge amount of Korean players playing Overwatch. Have you seen the
yeah,
signups for Open Division in Korea? It's bananas. It's 3 times more than Europe. It's 3 times more than North America. It's crazy. The amount of engagement of players and fans in Korea still dwarfs the West. Absolutely fucking dwarfs it. And the fact that the best teams in Korea have disappeared to play in the Overwatch League is going to make them hungrier. Not They haven't lost their idols. They've gained open spots to become the best players in Korea. It's now potentially easier for them to reach the top because they will not have to face the current giants. They will simply get to where they were, reach the top, continue to improve above them, and then look down on the people that have been locked into a franchise situation with no promotion, relegation, no getting rid of the shit teams, so you have to keep playing them all the time in a round robin tournament and just consistently dumpstering Florida Mayhem, Shanghai Dragons, and bloody Houston Outlaws at the bottom, and instead of playing against the best teams in Korea.
dude, my bullshit alarm just went off. What the?
No, you didn't just do that.
Wow.
That's
What the hell, dude?
fantastic. I think what actually
Like,
happened
oh.
is that your room went
Yeah.
as dark as the current mood of your argument. You've lost
No,
all
no,
the
because
light.
it's
You've lost all
a
the light of
ridiculous notion
reason.
to say, yes, suddenly I don't feel oppressed by all these idols I have that now play for basically my entire household income for the next 10 years
But they haven't
in my
left.
entire
It's in no sense have they left in terms of being idols. They are actually playing on a higher level, as in a
Yes,
higher
but
promotional level. They're looking at them playing in the Overwatch League. They're the fucking idols. They want to be
that's
there. They want to be in the Overwatch League. And their path to the
who
Overwatch League is dumpstering fucking
may
Korea. So they want to get
who
good in Korea.
who is going to have the experience to raise these players up? Like, who are the players that do the most astronomical rises? It's mostly the people that have surrounding experienced talent. Like, why was a Guido, someone like a Guido or like a who are you able to rise to the top so quickly? Because they play against this. They like the reason why who are you was for the longest time like the sickest Genji was because he was able to practice against the sickest Ana like on a private service, like Ru Hong, you want to go for them duels? Sure, all night. Now they're gone, mate. Like
The
it's over. It's such a bullshit argument.
No, but these are tiny little specific people that played in top teams. There are also a huge amount of players that got super good who weren't playing on top teams. I mean, the whole of GC Busan, for example, the whole of Runaway. These guys, when they first came onto I mean, the whole of Luxury Watch as well. When these guys first came onto the scene, they were not surrounded by some kind of structure that helped them, other than the existing Korean guys that had moved over from stuff
Yeah,
like League of
but
Legends and
they're not
become
competing
coaches and stuff like that.
against no structure. They're competing against Overwatch League structure. Even the best coaches have been sucked out. Like who's
But
going to develop that talent now?
it's
There's no
not
one.
about
They
they're not
once again have to
competing.
learn to do that.
They are not.
No, we're arguing if
Yeah,
the
yeah,
best
yeah, yeah.
Apex team is going to be better than the best Overwatch League team, and
Yes, yeah,
who's
yeah.
going to make them that?
But
Like
the thing is,
someone just going like, huh? I decided today that I'm going to be the best Overwatch League player. Like,
but
no,
they don't need the structure. Like you don't need existing. So I guess what you're trying to get at is that you expect the Overwatch League teams to continue improving And
Sure.
you think that will outpace the improvement of the Korean contenders teams because they have better structure? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, what I'm saying. Okay, so here was Apex, right? We can agree that Apex was probably better than anything that the West produced in terms
Definitely
of
better than
quality of
anything that the
play,
West
other
produced.
than a couple of. So, okay, this is Apex. This is the Western scene. Suddenly, Overwatch League happens, and it lands here, right? Look at this. So what's happening here is now the race is on, and even if Apex maybe accelerates at a rate, and keep it remembering, like this also has setbacks. Oh, our best player has been sucked out. Okay, and we're racing up again. Another Overwatch League team needs a full squad. We're racing up again, and obviously Overwatch League teams are also going up. And it's like, no, we can't catch up. We can't, dude.
But
It
again,
won't work.
this is not the situation where we're comparing averages of the skill level or something. We're talking about a few
No.
select top teams. So what we're really talking about is the same teams that were always competing in Korea, because presumably the top teams in Overwatch League are gonna be the Koreans, right? So if we allow that assumption, which seems pretty reasonable, we're talking about the same teams that always were competing in Korea. So now you've taken a couple of teams out and moved them into the Overwatch League. You can't really replace the rosters wholesale. There's no intention of doing that from the Overwatch League teams. They're not just going to drop their entire roster after Overwatch League season 1 and replace them, because marketing's such a huge point of the league. So it's I would consider it incredibly unlikely that a team like NYXL would just straight up drop their team if they finish somewhere like fourth and were still considered a top team, and
Sure.
replace them with the next Korean guys. So you're talking about 3 cores that have to stay at this level and continue to improve. They can't drop off, because if these 3 cores drop off, then they themselves are getting chunked down, and the steady rise, because remember, in Contenders Korea, we're not arguing that 3 teams in Contenders Korea that I have to name are going to improve to become the best. It can be any fucking team in Contenders Korea, and they have bloody
Yeah.
millions of them. And so the
But
statistical likelihood of them improving is much larger, because you have a huge base compared to 3 teams that must continue to improve over the course of whatever patches they play, of whatever moves they make, of playing in an area, at least for the first season, that's outside of their home. And for NYXL and London Spitfire will continue to be outside of their home and be in considerably less kind of favorable situations as Los Angeles. So the idea that these 3 teams will continue to steadily improve over time, I think, is also a flawed assumption. It's quite likely that one of these teams, at least, and probably multiple of them, will end up having large slumps in the future.
I mean, what maybe New York Excelsior. But
Listen, you don't get any points for
but the
arguing
thing is,
last week's bloody topic.
just saying, keep hitting that like button. No, but what I actually found out when I researched the idea of Corsa 4 is that they're incredibly resilient and that Course can transition. And how do they transition? They bring in new talent. They take an architect out, and suddenly X6 is the same shit show it always was before. Like maybe making quarters against these teams, right? It's like, yes, some teams can recuperate the loss if a player is being taken from them, but like that's not possible for every team. Do you think like what was a good team that? Do you think what was a team that was carried by one player that was also a good team? Do you think Metathena suddenly works in Apex Season 2 if Hoon is sucked out of that? Because, I don't know, some billionaire in the US decided to build an Overwatch League. No,
I think the
they would
Overwatch
be
League
screwed.
team would
They have to
probably go
completely
pretty far down, actually. I think that would also benefit my argument, because they pick up Hoon and they suddenly realize that you can only play one hero, and then they'd finish 6th.
I mean, they would also realize that he's probably 16 or something, so
Yeah, exactly.
they would.
He's another one of my young Koreans.
But I mean, yes, the problem is that the strength. Okay, there is Korean talent, individual talent that is obviously very good, and because of their work ethic, might be outpacing the Western talent by a little bit. But the big things that we know Korea is strong at is forming these very successful cores that have good team synergy, right? So if you take out key structures there or take out entire cores, and again, we have 4 teams possibly that need to build entire rosters, that also probably want to have a winning roster, then like you need to, or necessarily these teams will be disassembled. Like for instance, which team was Asher on?
Conbox.
Conbox. Do you think Conbox would have continued working without Architect and without
Well, Architect wasn't actually picked up, so I mean, it would have worked without Asher. The one player that was actually picked up for the Overwatch League team, yes, they could easily find a player to replace Asher. I mean, if they had the funds to do it, they could have picked up somebody like Decay, and they would be even better.
Funds is another thing. Casper is dead, mate. There's no Casper teams inside. This is not the industry where, like, when you said that you're going to consult League of Legends knowledgeable people, I was like, yes, this is the door, dude. Like, please focus on this. No, it's not the same strategy. It's not like Brood War, or it's not like League of Legends where you have these huge orgs, these people that have tenure in esports. Like, no, this is not the same. These small ass organizations like a Conbox or whatever, or like an X6. I don't even know if they have a sponsor. Like maybe they're praying for rice, basically. Like it.
But the fact of the matter is that these small organizations, as you say, have actually developed incredible teams, or have been able to find incredible players that then go on to perform in very good teams at a rate that at a rate that outpaces much larger organizations in the West. So I think your focus on infrastructure and organizational kind of stuff in Overwatch League is skewing the argument in weird ways, because the infrastructure has in no way correlated with the strength or ability of teams so far, and there's no reason to suggest that it will continue to do that. I mean, Runaway are playing out of fucking Flowervin's house with what some fan donated them a bloody washing machine or something. That's not infrastructure, and they made Apex finals twice, and then not in the Overwatch League still. I mean, it's very clear that within the Korean system, the players are so hungry and have so much motivation, and the coaching structure is there from other games, and coaches are involved in Overwatch that have all that time and put in all the effort, that they outpace even the best infrastructure over in the West.
Even if you have that talent that wants to improve the most, right, and wants to be the best again, and like you claim, make up the best team in the world, would they not go to the best league or to the highest achievement in the world? Would they not try to go to Overwatch League? I think they would be
the thing is, they would already have outpaced it by that point. Like, the argument that they would get picked up by an Overwatch League team is fair enough, because then you would reset the scales, right? But Contenders Korea would have already overtaken Overwatch League at that point, because if at some point the best team in the world is
talent is currently in Overwatch League, like a striker or something. Like these weren't tier 1 teams. Like there's demand for these players that will constantly keep bring them in. And then obviously also after, like, even if your argument wasn't to be that this contender season is going to be better than Overwatch League, then this cycle continues. They're just going to lay off the other players next season, and are just going to keep replenishing their talent. Like, it's always going to be a higher demand.
They're not going to expand 4 teams every season, right? So at some point there is going to be a system where Overwatch League has the so Nate Nanzer, I think, said in an interview a while back that he the management or whatever is aiming for 28 teams involved in the league. So if they get to 28 teams and there are X amount of Korean teams in it, they're not going to expect there's not going to be whole rosters being picked up every time. So now it's about bits and pieces all over the place, and bits and pieces are not enough to deplete Korea's the amount of talented players that they have. The fact that you're able to make at the moment very talented rosters that would be able to compete in Overwatch League and would have a chance at winning it, when you just on paper as well. This isn't even taking into account like running models of some team that drastically improves. This is just on paper what we've seen of their performance already. The fact that you are able to make such good rosters already outside of the Overwatch League, when there's there's only one team that's supposed to be from Korea, and there's 3 involved, and 47 players. The fact that you're still able to see so much talent shows that you can't just deplete it by picking up random people again and again. There are so many players there with talent and potential.
I already disagree with the premise, because I think, and by the way, this is my chance to get on this hill. everyone that didn't pick up a core is stupid as fuck and didn't do their their homework. Like the system how it's set up now is not that. Yes, if you have a winning core, you supplement. If you don't have a winning core, eject that shit into fucking outer space and get a
Okay. All
stellar
right.
core,
And
Korean
now,
core
and
that
now I'm gonna turn your hill into a fucking. It's actually a molehill you stood on, Yiska. The reason why you stood on a molehill is and about to sink into the earth into some fucking tunnel that they've dug is because you've hit the nail on the head. Overwatch League teams are not some kind of fantastic scouting ability that always picks up the best situation and always finds the best perfect Korean core and picks up the best talent and is always going to pick the best.
because they
Some of
don't
them
pay with stuff.
yeah, some of them are pretty shit. Some of them have made although the teams are still relatively good, like even the worst team in the league, the worst like Western or Korean team in the league, I think is still like gonna be a reasonable level. And I wouldn't say that any of them have completely and utterly shit the bed. They certainly haven't what do you call it? Uh maximized the ability of what they could have done. They haven't hit the peak of um, picking up the best player. There's still a ton of people left behind. There was still a ton of really good cores left behind. They made subpar rosters, or certainly worse rosters than they could have done. There is no reason to suggest that this will stop here. This will continue with new organizations that are added to the league, etc. Because when you're working on franchising and you're not working on promotion relegation, the shit does not leave, and the cream doesn't necessarily rise to the top. The cream is sat underneath the shit at the bottom, and the shit can't be ejected fast enough for the cream to kind of bubble up through the surface. It's a very complex cream shit kind of
I mean,
situation.
I'm very glad that I got you to admit that the sign up thing and the the coaching talent that picks out these players is shit in the West. I mean, that's already
I mean,
marvelous.
I
But
don't want to say they're shit because some of the even the worst teams are going to be okay, but it's definitely not the best that you possibly could have done. And in order for your argument of Korea being depleted to be even approaching true, in my opinion, you would have to have people scouting and creating cores and picking up teams that were approaching the best that you could possibly do, and also designed to maximize chances of succeeding rather than stuff like PR marketing, having a consistent core and therefore image throughout the league, keeping players that are good at having interviews, stuff like that. There are a huge wealth of intangibles that are involved in the Overwatch League that aren't involved in Contenders Korea, that allow them to be much freer, that allow freer movement of really good teams up through the ladder, because all that you really require is to be good and to win, and you will rise to the top. That's not the same in like the
I agree.
transition
Yeah,
up to the Overwatch League.
yeah, I agree. And but again, I don't think that's nearly enough. And especially the argument of signing players, like for instance, even someone like the New York Excelsior, the fact that they pulled out of entire like Apex season something
Ah,
because of that. Like, what happens
you
when
hit me with
someone
this one
some
again. You hit me with this one again. I don't know where it keeps coming from. It's some weird
but what
random.
happens if fucking I don't know Bill Gates decides actually my son really likes Overwatch. I want an Overwatch League team. Now we're
What
this is
happens
so
if
crazy.
Bill Gates buys an Overwatch League team? Yiska, what are we talking about here? What happens if Bill Gates? We've descended into mad levels of
No,
random.
but what I'm saying is like you can't even say that like maybe the very promising team that looks very good in the run up to the finals or something and looks like it could be happening. It's just again sucked out of it so they can learn English or something, and suddenly the league is worse, and then they need to get. It's like a fucking shift engine.
Okay, but I think it's uh also unlikely when we look back at past. Again, I mean, we have historical examples to look at. If you move the dial back a year, then I think it becomes difficult to argue that the same situation wouldn't arise, where you have, in fact, multiple teams over the course of a year, over the course of three contenders seasons, which would be a little bit similar to how Apex was run in the past, where you would get different teams over the course of that entire year when Overwatch League's locked in and they can't pick up new people or whatever. Over the course of that entire year, you get a lot of change and a lot of roster shuffles and stuff like that because it's a freer system that allows talent to rise up. Again, looking back at examples, I think it's very possible that a story like GC Busan could happen again. I think it's very possible that a story like Luxury Watch Blue could happen again, and it's almost similar to what happened with X6 in the sense that they added a star player and had a decent team moving there, and have now become a much better team for it, and were performing really well in the Nexus Cup. There are so many opportunities for mediocre teams in Korea to suddenly become really good because they have so much star power involved in the scene. And it's also really possible for brand new teams with players nobody's ever heard of, like GC Busan, coming up and ending up being the winners. I mean, we thought we might have a similar situation with Meta Athena as well when they did their run of 20 unbeaten matches, and we've had other teams as well where they have had cores or star players that have been added that have just been unknown and then discovered only by virtue of their success. I don't see any reason why these events would not happen again. Like the only argument that these
As
wouldn't happen again is that the Overwatch League teams would continue to outpace them. But the rise of a
no,
team
no,
like GC
not
Busan or
just
whatever is
outpaced,
so
but also
meteoric.
because the talent pool, yes, the talent pool is bigger than in the other regions, but that is not even an argument against having these best teams because now it's definitely smaller. How likely is it that you're going to have like one of the profit level talents again?
Well, it
Now
happens
increase
fucking
actually
all the time.
2.5 times less likely.
Well, 2.5 times less likely in terms of you're basing that in terms of play time. I don't think it's 2.5 times less likely in terms of the actual players involved. The again, referencing the signups of Contenders Korea, I think it was something like 950 teams signed up to Contenders Korea compared to 350 or something is the next
Oh, you
highest
mean
in
open?
Europe.
Is that
Yes, yeah,
what's
yeah.
it called
Sorry,
then?
not Contenders. That's open. That's like the low level stuff that's trying to get into Contenders, right? Which is the same system essentially, because all of these teams that had meteoric rises started in the open system. Um, so even though the talent pool has, in fact, I'm not even sure whether it's been reduced. Definitely, I mean, it's inarguable that the PC Bong playtime has gone down or shifted over to PUBG, but that also measures time played rather than amount of people. Like the same amount of people could still be
It's
playing
actually
Overwatch.
worse.
They're just not playing Overwatch
Much. Yeah.
exclusively.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
like split
They're
Overwatch
casuals
and
now.
stuff.
They're all casuals. They have the
There
exact
are
same
no
amount, but
casuals in
not the
Korea.
hardcore players. And nobody cares anymore. That's actually all the Korean fangirls currently. Maybe we will see female gamers now, right? That's also like when you said, yeah, look at the fan engagement. There's one dude in the audience. Unless you foretell, and obviously I'm not opposed to that thought that we might have Korean female teams competing in contenders. Like the fan engagement doesn't work in that way. It's just casual plebs, mate.
But what we were arguing was actually cultural engagement, and I would say
Yeah, cultural engagement, like Jae-hong.
I would say that in a lot of situations, uh if we assume your model that the different genders are occupying different roles within the Korean system, the guys are playing the women are the fans.
No, I'm sure
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Korea also has a
Oh
higher
yeah, yeah.
percentage of females in the top
Oh,
500
absolutely. Yeah.
than
No, it
in the
definitely
West.
will as well. But in that situation, I think that would even motivate people to be players as well because they want these raging fans. Like they actually want that kind of
Oh,
situation.
now they're this keeps getting better. Dude, shut it out. Now you're saying they're
Ah, this is definitely.
motivated by
Yo,
Korean
shall
porn, dude.
I
Like, what the?
shall I tell you my my maths teacher when I was applying for university said that I should strongly consider, range of universities. One of them was called Loughborough, and I said, "Sir, why do you think I should apply to Loughborough? Like, I don't need I have higher qualifications than they're asking for. There are other universities that are supposed to be better for what I'm studying. Why would you do that?" He was like, I went there. I was like, oh, okay, he's just got some kind of allegiance for it. And he said, I went there for one very specific reason. I thought, what the hell is coming here? He said, I looked at the ratio of males to females, and it has the highest female to male ratio out of any of the universities for this course. We were like, okay, that is a very odd. He said, it worked. I met my wife there. Now, the moral of this story is men are
It,
stupid. straight men are stupid and they will do anything for women, and that is
And he also didn't know that you were into young Korean boys, so
again, I
yeah.
they are young Korean boys, yes, but hot only in the sense of their form, and their form, not their human
Which
form,
form?
their form in the game. Again,
Sure.
straying into weird territories here, Yiska.
Nothing Freudian here. Nothing to.
Now, to bring it back to the point though, I don't think there's any situation in which you can uh, fundamentally say there's anything different about the situations in which teams like GC Busan and LW Blue and Runaway and these kind of teams would rise up. Like this will happen again. It's just a matter of time.
Let me. So just to round this out, right, and maybe bring it to an end.
Yeah.
Do you think we have any method of testing who's what they actually, or is there anything that needs to happen, or some event where you can clearly see, okay, now that argument has taken place. Now we definitely, because they probably, I don't know what happens during the off season. Maybe that's a good.
Yeah, hopefully the off season would solve this. I mean, ideally that would. I think at some point it would you would hope that it would be evident in their gameplay, but the two regions are so separated that it might actually not be the case, you know, especially with like a slightly different meta happening on the LAN client because people enjoy playing the hit scans and stuff like that. And the large difference in terms of ping and the classic Korean bubble because they all play against each other and come up with different styles and faster in that sense. I think we would have to rely on something like an off-season tournament to be able to really see this in action.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that.
But I
Then
mean,
if we maybe
at the moment as well, I think it's also reasonable to say there is a world, in fact, there are many worlds in which Runaway wins one of, if not both, of those Apex seasons in which they made the final and lost 3-4. And there is
I mean, at
also
this point, it's almost chronicled for them to finish second. There might be something psychological. I think they have 3 or 4 second
yeah.
place finishes.
And so also
They're
we
like
I think we also don't even potentially need to wait for another meteoric rise of a team. If Runaway managed to get their shit together, which obviously they completely flopped in the Nexus Cup as they did in Apex Season 3 as well. But this is a team that has this kind of ability and has demonstrated it before and could actually get to a point where they're beating teams like, for example, Seoul Dynasty or London London Spitfire as well. So I think there are also teams that exist there. Somebody like Ardiont could potentially do it as well with some improvements and playing in an off season. There are still talented teams out there in Korea that will keep pace, I think, with the Korean teams inside. I think also the off season will just be incredibly interesting because uh, I think both when we look at the reality of the situation, I think both arguments are definitely possible. Like Owl could end up outpacing contenders, or the teams could just win in whatever one-off tournaments they have. But don't I really strongly don't think that Contenders Korea will cease to be a place where very strong teams and talent is pulled from to create Overwatch League teams and stuff like that. I still think that it will be the best region and will be either neck and neck or very slightly behind the Overwatch
Cool.
League. So
I mean,
it'll make for
yes,
great
yes,
off-season tournaments.
I agree, but I just tend to bet on the league that has all the previous winners of all Apex seasons still in it,
That is true. That is
right?
absolutely true. Well, we will see. Hopefully, in the off season, we can place a little. I was going to say place a little bet on it. That's Bren's business. I don't want to start getting into that.
I
That
would
guy's
bet on
mental.
that. I'd
Eating
rather
soup
do
jackets in
that
his
than
house.
Crooked.
All right. So again, I forgot to mention it in the previous episode actually, but if you believe the argument for that contenders, or I don't suppose I should really say believe, but if you were persuaded perhaps by the argument for that contenders
It's
Korea
definitely
will
belief. It's
overtake.
almost religious at this point. But
Actually, what we should say is if you just believe the headline without watching any of the video, then please leave a comment. And if you watch the video, then actually don't even bother leaving a comment because we only really care about people who only read the headline, didn't even use the content, and
Nobody
then
does.
downvote it anyway. So, I don't know why I even bother. It's just clickbait in the end anyway.
Yeah.